The Bold and the Beautiful, Rain Wreckage. And a black SUV Brooke's near-death sets off a ruthless hunt inside Forester. The sky over the canyon road was a bruised slate when Brooke Logan took the wheel and pointed the nose of her car toward home. Wind shoved rain sideways across the windshield, wipers beat a frantic rhythm, and the guardrails flashed like wet steel under the headlights. She had left Forester later than planned, notes from a late design review still rattling in her head, a message from Hope waiting, and Rich's voice lingering from the doorway. Careful. The pass is ugly tonight. She answered with a tired smile and went anyway. Halfway up the incline, the pedal went soft. It wasn't the tremor of a slick road or the stutter of ABS. It was emptiness. She pressed again and the pedal fell to the floor. The car's weight surged forward, the tail fishtailed, and the shoulder rushed at her like a black mouth. Brooke cut the wheel, downshifted, yanked the emergency brake, and felt the vehicle skid, bite, and slide, metal shrieking as it kissed the rail. Then spun to a brutal stop nose first against a rock outcrop. Airbag. Silence. Rain. A cell phone buzzing somewhere in the cabin. She was alive, but it had not been luck. Someone had hollowed out her brakes. The first responders found telltale signs before the tow truck even hooked the frame. The brake line was scored, not torn. The reservoir cap had fresh tool marks, the kind clean gloves leave when someone wants to be careful and isn't careful enough. The highway patrol called it what it looked like: tampering. There was gravel embedded in the front bumper, pine needles trapped in the cracked grille, glass dust blooming across the dash, and in the undercarriage a smear of something that wasn't road grime. By the time Rich Forrester arrived at the scene, a flash of headlights in the rain, a door slamming, his name called once by an officer and then again by a medic. Brooke was being loaded for transport. Her lashes were clotted with rain, hair matted to her cheek, knuckles bloodless where her hands still trembled around a crumpled steering wheel cover. He reached for her and heard the words that tore straight through the storm. Mr. Forrester, we think her brake system was compromised. The hospital smell and the crash side mud clung to him when he faced the family. Eric stood stiff, jaw like granite. Hope was white and shaking. Donna's fingers wouldn't stop twisting a napkin. Carter hovered, voice even and eyes hard. Taylor came because there was no world in which she wouldn't. And Steffi's absence left a hollowness in the room that made everyone talk too loudly. Then came the list no one wanted to hear and everyone needed to. Suspects weren't strangers this time. The circle tightened fast around the old grudges and the ones that never healed. Sheila Carter, because death and chaos are her favorite signatures. Thomas Forrester, because the Italy kiss had torn the scab off a wound that never closed and rage can push a person past reason. And a new collaborator in the sample room. A face so fresh no one remembered when she arrived, which made her easy to overlook in all the worst ways. The detectives didn't say the names, Rich did. And when he did, his voice carried the edge of a man who had run out of chances to give. I am going to bring whoever did this into the light, he said. Even if it's family, evidence answered before emotions could. Lab swabs from the reservoir found a synthetic blend not sold retail, a track day fluid a few pros liked for certain builds. A shop would have it. Forrester's shop did. The lines cut was to clean for a jagged rock or random failure. It matched a narrow blade tool, the kind technicians use when they're leaning over a lift in a hurry. Security logs from the Forrester garage showed a badge swipe in the late afternoon just after Brooke's last meeting. And the camera overlooking the loading bay caught a hood opened and closed in a slice of rain. It was grainy, and the figure wore a cap, but the posture said confidence, not curiosity. Whoever reached into her engine knew exactly what to touch and how long it would take. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a plan. Ridge went to the crash site himself at first light, rain beaten into mist, and the canyon smelling like wet stone. He watched the skid marks and traced them with his eyes until the rails kinked and the boulders showed the scar where Brooke's car had stopped. Rage felt clean here. He could place it. It wanted a target. It wanted a face. When the investigator pointed at the brake line and walked him through the mechanical proof, He thanked the man and stood with his hands on his knees and breathed until he could hear something besides blood in his ears. Then he stood and made the call no one else could make. An internal lockdown at Forrester, full access audit, no exceptions, not for executives, not for family, not for anyone who had touched a tool or a key in the last 72 hours. Suspicion rarely walks alone in this family. It drags history behind it. Thomas had the ugliest motive on paper. The photo from Italy hadn't stopped echoing. Brooke's body under Ridge's hands, the kiss caught in a flash of scandal, and Thomas's voice, hard and clipped. Did you have to kiss her? He had barked at his father and then gone quiet in a way that made everyone who knew him nervous. He had also disappeared for a 2-hour block the day of the sabotage. His calendar marked vendor check and his location tag conveniently dead because he said the battery on his phone had died. He swore he had been driving the coastal road to clear his head. He swore he had pulled into a surf shop to charge his phone and buy a board for Douglas as a surprise. He swore he had nothing to do with Brooke's car. And Taylor, caught between a mother's defense and a doctor's realism, believed him with her heart and hesitated with her eyes. Sheila's name didn't so much enter the conversation as stain it. She had fewer reasons to hurt Brooke than usual, which meant more. The woman makes a hobby of tearing Brooke down, but this tactic timpering with a car on a mountain road wreaked more of a patient cruelty than a headline grab. Sheila has patience when revenge is personal, and she has a habit of hiring other hands to do dirty work when she's being watched. Bill's memory of her tricks made him show up uninvited in Ridge's office, Josh said, offering resources Ridge didn't want but took. Contacts at private lots. A play treater sweep along the canyon corridor. A favor from someone who owed him to. He said the word no one wanted to believe. Mole, if Brooke's brakes were cut with a shop-grade blade. If the fluid came from a shelf in a building they controlled, then someone inside had helped. Whether they knew who they were helping or not. The new collaborator in the sample room, her portfolio thin, her references charming, her work ethic uncomplaining from background noise to bold print overnight. Kira Malone had arrived as a seasonal hire. Junior pattern hand, good eyes stronger with muslins than with silk. The type of technician who keeps to a corner and does the unglamorous tasks without complaint. No one remembered who had signed the final approval on her onboarding. HR data said a temp agency. The temp agency said a subcontractor. The subcontractor fielded an email with a signature that bounced. And at the very moment Brooke's hood was popped on the garage camera, Kira's badge had pinged in the materials cage 2 doors down. When Carter requested full pasting of badge pings against hallway cameras, a gap appeared. One camera went static for 12 minutes that afternoon. IT had chalked it up to a storm surge. A check of the breaker showed a thumbprint in the dust where someone had toggled and then wiped. Hope sat at Brooke's bedside and tried not to tremble when her mother squeezed her hand. The injuries were loud but survivable. A concussion, a hairline fracture, bruises blooming like ink under her collarbone. Brooke kept asking about the car, the road, the sound the pedal made when it died under her shoe. When Ridge came in, she stopped asking and listened. He told her the truth without dressing it up. He told her he was tearing Forrester apart to find out who did this. He told her he would not look away if that path led to blood. She asked him if he believed Thomas capable. He answered like a man in a room with a dynamite crate and a lit match. I believe someone who hates what we are together did this. And I'm going to find out who. Then the city handed them the first clean strand of hard evidence. A traffic camera up canyon caught Brooke's taillights at 7:18 p.m., steady but accelerating too fast for the rain. 10 seconds later, a black SUV slid into frame, holding distance behind her bumper. The plate was caked with mud. The frame style matched a rental fleet. The driver kept the SUV just far enough away to vanish around bends and just close enough to watch. Another camera, lower on the pass, saw the same SUV pause where the road narrowed, then accelerate after Brooke's car reappeared, its left turn signal blinking too long. The SUV never stopped after the crash. It turned at the turnout, idled 2 minutes, and reversed out toward the city. The rental office remembered an alias, Nina Cross. The ID was a clean fake with a real barcode. The deposit came in cash and a prepaid card. The timestamp put the rental at noon, return at 9:03 p.m., a wipe down that smelled like ammonia. The clerk remembered eyes the color of bottled green and a jacket too thin for the weather. He also remembered she wore a Forrester staff lanyard on the wrong color strap kind HR had discontinued months ago. When surveillance from the rental lot was cross-checked against hallway cameras at Forrester, Kira walked into frame with her jacket open and a lanyard on her neck. The strap color matched. She passed a mirror. In the reflection, a shadow bulged at her hip under the jacket, something long and narrow in a fabric sleeve kind that could hold a compact tool roll. Rich didn't wait for external orders. He called a floor-wide meeting under the pretext of a safety briefing, new protocols, tighter sign-out on the garage lift, tool cage audits, vehicle keys moved to a controlled locker. He watched faces. He watched hands. He watched who looked at the floor when he said break line. Kira took a spot near the door, shoulders relaxed, eyes attentive. When he ended the briefing by announcing surprise one-on-ones about access compliance, she didn't flinch. Carter asked her to step into a conference room to review her onboarding paperwork. It, at Ridge's quiet instruction, cloned her network session and PIN for connected devices. A second device name unknown handshook and then severed. In her tote bag, Kira kept a hard case for pattern weights and a flat box for measuring tapes. In the lining seam, an officer's fingertip found a tiny pocket with a micro SD card the size of a clipped nail. They questioned her with HR present and counsel on standby. She smiled the tired smile of someone used to being underestimated and gave short answers. She loved the work she kept to herself. She didn't even own a car. When they asked about the lanyard color, she said it was what the agency handed her. When they asked about the afternoon of the accident, she said she had been organizing deadstock, a job no one else wanted. When they showed a still of the SUV at the turnout, she shook her head like she was looking at weather she didn't care about. When the detective slid the microcard across the table and asked if she wanted an attorney, she rolled her shoulders once, as if warming up for a run, and looked at Ridge a fraction of a second too long. Hope walked in on Thomas standing in a corridor staring at a frame from the traffic cam stills, eyes unfocused, jaw tight. He looked like a man remembering every accusation he had earned and every one he hadn't. He told her he did not touch Brooke's car. He told her he did not want his father to live with another nightmare he caused. He told her he wanted the person who did this taken apart. He offered a list of people who might have reasoned enemies, dismissed models. A vendor stiffed by a late payment and then stopped when he heard his own voice and realized the only name anyone would hear coming out of his mouth was his. He caught Hope's hand, held it, and said he would sit for any test, open any locker, hand over any device. She believed him for reasons he couldn't articulate. And when Ridge's text flashed on every phone conference room, now Thelma's didn't hesitate. He walked in first. The twist snapped into place with a voice message no one in that building expected to hear on a Forrester device. The microcard, when read, held 3 files. The first security steals from Forrester's own loading bay cameras on a day they were supposed to be down, faces moving in and out of frame with time stamps. The second, photos of company ID badges laid out on a cutting table next to a laminator. The third, an audio clip recorded at low gain, filtered later to mask the speaker, but not enough. Kira, you are not paid to be seen. You are paid to finish the job and leave them bleeding inside their pretty building. Don't forget who fed you the key. Sheila Carter's cadence, heft at the edges, coiled into a whisper that wrapped around Kira's alias like a leash. Assistant, operative, plant, call it what it was. Kira Malone wasn't a temp. She was Sheila's shadow, inserted into Forrester months earlier under a shell contract, built to do exactly this and more. The rest came fast because it had to. The badge trails that seemed random weren't. They triangulated around the garage and the loading bay on days when Brooke's car had been serviced and on days when the executive lot had been held open late. The synthetic brake fluid purchase traced to a cash buy at a motorsport pop-up in a warehouse in Vernon, camera catching a half profile of Kira's face under a cap while she counted bills. The rental SUV's route pinged off city cameras enough to draw a ghost map over the canyon and back to a storage unit where a duffel bag waited with a burner phone, a jar of that same fluid, nitrile gloves, and a second lanyard printed with a name no one had ever hired. On the burner's voicemail, 3 messages. The first a time confirmation, the second a weather warning, and the third, after the crash, a single line, "You are done now. Go quiet." Rich stood there and didn't sit. He told security to lock the building down and let the detectives do it by the book. He told Carter to walk Kira to the lobby and not touch her. He told Thomas to stay. He told Eric he was sorry in a voice shredded by lack of sleep. When the officers put cuffs on Kira, she kept her chin level and her mouth shut until she hit the curb and saw the cameras. Then she flinched like the rain had suddenly turned to hail. Bill arrived in time to see the car door close and didn't hide his satisfaction. Whatever complicated entropy exists between him and Sheila, this one belonged to the side that breathes. Taylor found Ridge in an empty atelier afterward, lights off, the rain finally easing. He said the words again even if it had been one of us. I would have done the same because he needed to hear them out loud more than she did. She told him he had protected all of them by refusing to protect anyone in particular. She told him she would never ask him to soften the truth to save her from it. And then she told him what the whole building felt, that the damage hadn't ended at the guardrail. Trust had ripped. Lines had moved. Old reflexes had woken accusation, defense proof, penalty. It would take time for the floors to stop vibrating. Brooke woke to the news everyone had been carrying in their bones since the moment the brake pedal fell away. A plant, not family. Not a son exploding under the weight of jealousy. Not an ex with a taste for carnage walking in the door herself. Not a colleague pushed past their limit. A quiet stranger with a badge who had walked their halls for months, listening, measuring, learning where the blind spots were. Sheila's assistant. The dark echo of every warning Brooke had dismissed when she told herself she was safe inside those glass walls. Relief should have flooded her. It didn't. Relief would come later. First came fury that someone had brought the fight to her car, to a rain-slick pass, to a moment where fate and physics could have taken her life and left her children, her family. And even the woman who loved the same man standing in a hospital hallway counting breaths. The Forresters and the Logans gathered in one room without pee or spin, without Taylor's chalk on their sleeves, without the thin jokes they use when they want to hide fear. Rich said the promise again, not because the arrest made it unnecessary, but because it made it binding. He would go after whoever stood behind the assistant, whoever wrote the checks, whoever made this play to break them from the inside. He didn't say Sheila's name. He didn't have to. Everyone heard it. Everyone pictured the grin that always arrives 1 second before the knife. Thomas stepped forward and faced Brooke. He didn't apologize for things he had never done, and he didn't ask for forgiveness for sins that still belonged to him. He said he had wanted to hate her for the Italy photo and for the way the city never stops forgiving her. He said those feelings didn't matter when someone tried to kill her. He said he would help find the rest of Sheila's web even if it meant walking into rooms that hated him. Brooke nodded once, eyes clear. There would be fights later, and words with edges, and an inventory of hurts too long to hold in one conversation. But not now. Now they had an enemy who didn't care which last name they used as long as it burned. By dusk the rain had moved out and the canyon steamed. The guardrail had been hammered straight. The scrape on the boulder would take longer to fade. At Forrester, maintenance replaced camera housings and IT patched every port that should have been locked a year ago. HR tore through contractor files with a ruthlessness that would have made past versions of them blush. The garage smelled like solvent and new paint. The key locker clicked shut under a code only 3 people now knew. And in a police evidence bin, a lanyard lay coiled next to a tool roll and a prepaid card, 3 ordinary things that had nearly rewritten the story of a family. Rich stood at Brooke's door and watched her breathe under a clean blanket. Eric came and went with a hand on his son's shoulder that said everything words didn't. Hope slept sitting up, finally chin on her chest. And Donna's laugh could be heard 3 rooms away because she refuses to let quiet win. Taylor paused at the threshold and gave Ridge the slightest nod, not a truce, not surrender, but acknowledgement that grief and anger can sit in the same chair and do the same job when the house is in danger. He answered with the only oath that made sense now. Stripped of romance and filled with resolve, the person who directed the assistant will be found. Sheila Carter will not turn their floors into a hunting ground again. And the Forresters and the Logonsto names that have fought like rival rivers will meet this as one because survival demands it. And somewhere in the city, on a phone that never sees the light, a blocked number went to voicemail. The message waiting was shorter than fear and colder than apology. We missed. The war had moved, not ended. But this time the house knew exactly where to aim, exactly who wrote the script, and exactly what it would cost to finish it. Ridge had already paid the down payment with a promise he could not break. He had set it under rain and in a room that smelled like antiseptic and in an atelier where history hung from every rolling rack. Bring the guilty into the light, even if the light reveals a face he loves. Now that the first mask had been torn away, there was nothing left but the hunt.